The glow from my monitor was the only light left in the entire office. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing the grit from my eyes. 11:47 p.m. The digital numbers on my screen felt like an accusation. I'd promised Lily I'd be home by 8 to help her pack for our trip to Lake Tahoe. Another broken promise. My phone buzzed, skittering on the glass desk. It was Mark. I hit accept on the video call, forcing a smile onto my face. "Hey, you," I said, my voice raspy with fatigue. His face filled the screen, warm and concerned. "Natalie, still at the office?" I was starting to get worried. I know. I'm sorry. The Henderson proposal, it's a beast. I just need to cross-reference these last few metrics. And the presentation is finally done." I sighed, the weight of the day pressing down on me. "Is Lily asleep?" "Out like a light. She tried to wait up for you, but the excitement of tomorrow wore her out." He shifted the phone, angling it towards our daughter's bedroom door, slightly ajar. I could just make out the shape of her, buried under her favorite unicorn comforter. A pang of guilt, sharp and immediate, shot through me. "Tell her I'm sorry. First thing tomorrow. It's all about her. Pinky swear. She knows. Honey, we both do. Just wrap it up and get home safe." "Okay, I'll leave the porch light on." "I will. Love you. Love you more," he said, his smile easy, genuine, the perfect, supportive husband. It was the anchor I needed after a day like this. We hung up, and the empty silence of the office rushed back in. I saved my work, methodically shut down my computer, and slid the laptop into my bag. Home. Bed. The thought was a siren's call. The drive through downtown San Francisco was quiet. My headlights cut through the marine layer fog, the city gleaming like a wet jewel. I replayed the call with Mark in my head. We both know that he was always so understanding about my job, about the long hours it took to keep my tech startup, Nexus Path, afloat. He'd taken a step back from his own finance career when Lily was born, choosing freelance, consulting to be more present. I was the breadwinner, and he never once seemed to resent it, or so I thought. I pulled into the driveway of our Pacific Heights home just after midnight. The porch light was on, just as he'd promised. A small, warm gesture. I was so drained. My brain felt like static. I fumbled with my keys at the front door, stepped into the dark, quiet foyer, and dropped my bag by the stairs. All I could think about was collapsing into bed. I was halfway up the staircase, my hand on the polished banister, when the thought hit me like a physical blow. The Henderson files, the printed, bound, physical copies. I needed them for the final sign-off meeting on Monday, the one right after we were supposed to return from Tahoe. I'd left them on my desk at home. In my pre-dawn rush this morning, I'd completely forgotten to pack them. Damn it, I whispered into the stillness. Going back to the office was unthinkable, but showing up to the Henderson meeting unprepared was professional suicide. I stood there, frozen, for a full minute, wrestling with my own exhaustion. Responsibility won. I'd have to drive back. The irony was bitter. I'd just spent 45 minutes getting home, and now I had to spend another hour and a half going back and forth. At this rate, I'd be lucky to get 2 hours of sleep. I crept back down the stairs, trying not to make a sound. Mark was a light sleeper. The last thing I wanted was to explain this whole ridiculous situation and see that faint, barely perceptible look of pity in his eyes. The one that said, "I told you you were taking on too much." I slipped out the front door, wincing as the latch clicked shut louder than I'd hoped. I'd just grab the files and go, in and out. I was about to get back into my car when I saw it, a sliver of light, not from our bedroom upstairs, but from under the door of Mark's first-floor study. That's odd, that I thought. He must have fallen asleep at his desk again. I decided to check on him before I left. Maybe I could kiss him goodbye without waking him. I moved quietly along the path to the side of the house, where the study window looked out onto the garden. The blind was down, but not all the way. There was a gap, and then I heard it, his voice, but it wasn't the warm, sleepy voice of a man who'd just woken up. It was sharp, clear, and buzzing with a nervous energy that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I crept closer, my heart starting a slow, heavy thud in my chest. I peered through the gap in the blinds. Mark wasn't alone. Chloe, my so-called friend, the one who was always available for a lunch date when I was too busy, was perched on the edge of his desk. She was wearing one of Miss Silk robes, the one Mark had bought me for our anniversary in Napa. My breath caught in my throat. The betrayal was a sucker punch. So visceral, I had to put a hand against the cool stucco of the house to steady myself. An affair that I felt sick. That was the thought, the only thought my reeling brain could form. It was enough to shatter me, but it was only the beginning. Are you sure everything is set for tomorrow? Chloe asked, her voice a low, eager purr. It's perfect, Mark said, a grim smile on his face. He picked up a glass of whiskey from his desk. I recognized the bottle. Macallan, 25. Another anniversary gift. The trail she accidentally picked for her morning hike? It's a nightmare after the rain we had. Slippery, narrow, with a gorgeous 200-foot drop. Search and rescue won't find her for days. The world tilted. The static in my head became a deafening roar. Shida, he meant me. Chloe let out a soft, thrilled laugh. And the insurance? The company shares? The policy is rock solid. Double indemnity for accidental death. And with the power of attorney I have, plus the will, Nexus Path is ours. All of it. The house, the investments, everything. Our company. She corrected him, sliding off the desk and into his arms. No more late nights. No more being second best to her spreadsheets. It will finally be our life. Our money. Mark kissed her. A long, deep kiss that felt like it was happening in slow motion. I watched, numb, detached, as if I were observing some horrific play. Tomorrow, he said, pulling away, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that I had to strain to hear. By this time tomorrow, it'll all be over. She'll be gone, and we can stop hiding. I can't wait. Chloe breathed, resting her head on his shoulder. To think, all it took was one wrong step on a mountain trail. They stood there, wrapped in each other, celebrating my imminent murder. The cold, calculating nature of it drained all the warmth from my body. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a business plan, a hostile takeover of my entire life. I didn't make a sound. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. Something inside me, something stronger than the shock, stronger than the heartbreak, clicked into place. It was a cold, hard, crystalline certainty. I backed away from the window, each step deliberate and silent. The files no longer mattered. The Henderson meeting was a speck of dust in a hurricane. The only thing that mattered was the decision solidifying in my core. They thought they had planned the perfect crime. They thought I was a pawn, an obstacle to be removed. They were wrong. I made it back to my car, my hand steady as I slid into the driver's seat. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there in the dark, watching the sliver of light under my husband's study door. The woman who had walked into that house 10 minutes ago, the tired, guilty, overworked wife and mother, was gone. In her place was someone else, someone with nothing left to lose and a very clear, very dangerous purpose. Mark and Chloe had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had told me their move. Now it was my turn. I started the car and pulled away, the sound of the engine swallowed by the sleeping neighborhood. I had a long night ahead of me and a trip to pack for. The first light of dawn was a dirty gray smear against the San Francisco skyline by the time I pulled into an all-night diner off the 101. My body hummed with a corrosive mix of adrenaline and exhaustion. I needed caffeine, a plan, and a place where I could think without the walls feeling like they were closing in. I slid into a sticky vinyl booth and ordered a black coffee from a waitress who looked as tired as I felt. When the chipped mug landed in front of me, I wrapped my hands around it. the heat barely registering. The image of Chloe in my robe, of Mark's grim smile, played on a loop behind my eyes. Our company, our money. The words were a brand on my brain. This wasn't just about a fair. It was an extermination. I was the inconvenient bug they were planning to squash on some scenic mountain trail. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a cold, sharp clarity. I would not run. I would not confront them. Not yet. They thought they were hunters. I would show them what it meant to be prey. My first call wasn't to the police. What would I say? My husband and my best friend are planning to kill me. I heard it through the window. That IT sounded like a bad Lifetime movie. They'd deny it. I'd look hysterical. It would tip my hand. And the next accident might come sooner. And be less subtle. No. I needed evidence. I needed armor. I needed to make sure that when I exposed them, they had nowhere to run. I pulled out my burner phone, a cheap, pay-as-you-go thing I'd bought an hour earlier from a 24/7 gas station, and then my personal cell. I opened the Secure Notes app, one used for work. At the top of a new page, I typed, Operation Wrong Turn. Then, I started drafting emails. The first was to Arthur Finch, my lawyer and the closest thing I had to a pit bull. It was 5:30 a.m. He'd be awake. To Arthur Finch, from Natalie Bennington. Subject.urgent, estate planning revision. Offline discussion required. Arthur, I need to make significant, immediate revisions to my will and all associated trusts. This is a non-negotiable priority. Stemming from serious and urgent personal security concerns I cannot detail over email. I require a meeting today, under absolute discretion. Your office, 8 a.m. Please confirm. Do not call or message my home or personal cell. This email is the only secure channel. Natalie. I hit send. Arthur was a paranoid old-school lawyer who valued billable hours above all else. The tone would get his attention. The next email was to Sarah Chin, my COO and the only person at Nexus Path I trusted with my life. To Sarah Chin, from Natalie Bennington. Subject, offline briefing, critical corporate actions. Sarah, a personal matter requires my complete and private attention for the next 72 hours. I will be unreachable for all but the most critical issues, which you are authorized to handle as you see fit. Additionally, I need you to execute the attached letters of instruction. They pertain to the transfer of my Class B voting shares into a new blind trust. The trustee details are TBD, but the transfer initiation must happen now. This is the highest priority. Absolute silence on this. Sarah, no one can know, not even Mark. I'll explain everything soon. N. Attaching the pre-drafted share transfer documents. I felt a sliver of satisfaction. Mark knew I was protective of my voting shares, but he had no idea about the Byzantine trust structures Arthur and I had set up for exactly this kind of scenario. A scenario I'd never imagined would be necessary. He was about to find out that his company was a fortress he couldn't breach. By 6:15 a.m., I had replies from both. Arthur, my office, 8 a.m., back entrance. Coffee will be black, Sarah. Consider it done. Be safe. Natalie, call when you can. I paid for my coffee with cash and drove back towards Pacific Heights. I needed to be home before Mark and Lily woke up. I needed to put on the performance of my life. I parked in the driveway, taking a moment to school my features into something resembling weary relief. I slipped inside as quietly as I'd left. The house was still quiet. I crept upstairs, past Lily's room, and into the master bathroom. I turned on the shower, stripped off my clothes from the day before, and stood under the scalding water, trying to wash the filth of their betrayal off my skin. It didn't work. When I emerged, wrapped in a towel, Mark was sitting up in bed, blinking sleep from his eyes. Natalie, what time did you get in? He asked, his voice thick with sleep, the perfect picture of a concerned husband. Just now, I said, forcing a yawn. The Henderson data was a complete mess. Had to rebuild half the model. I walked to my closet, turning my back to him so he couldn't see my face. I needed the barrier of clothing between us. "Honey, you're going to kill yourself," he said, and I froze, my hand on a hanger. The casual use of the phrase sent a jolt through me. I took a steadying breath. "I know, but it's done now. Just in time for Tahoe." I turned around, a smile plastered on my face. "I'm all yours for the next 4 days. No phones, no emails." He got out of bed and came over to me, pulling me into a hug. My body went rigid. His touch, once a comfort, now felt like a violation. I could smell his cologne, and underneath it, I imagined I could smell Chloe's perfume. "You're freezing," he murmured into my hair. "Long night," I mumbled into his shoulder, patting his back, the gesture feeling alien and false. "Let me get dressed. I'll start breakfast." I practically fled to the kitchen. I was cracking eggs when Lily came bounding in, a whirlwind of 7-year-old energy. "Mommy, you're home," she shrieked, wrapping her arms around my legs. I knelt down, pulling her close, breathing in the sweet, innocent scent of her. This was what I was fighting for. Not the money, not the company. Her. "I'm home, sweet pea, and I'm not going anywhere." I kissed the top of her head, the words a silent vow. Mark came in a few minutes later, pouring himself a coffee. "So, what's the plan? We hit the road by 10? Sounds perfect," I said, my voice bright. "I just need to pop into the office for one quick second to drop off the finalized Henderson files for Sarah. I forgot to bring them home last night." The lie slipped out smoothly. "I'll be back by 9:30 latest." Mark's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "On a Saturday, before our vacation? Can it wait?" "It'll take me 20 minutes," I said, layering on the exasperation. "If I don't do it now, it'll be hanging over me the whole trip. You know how I am." He chuckled, a hollow sound. "Do I ever? Okay, hurry back." The doorbell rang. My heart stuttered. It was 7:55, right on time. "I'll get it," Lily yelled, running for the door. "Lily." "No," Mark and I said in unison. He got there first, opening the door. Chloe stood on our doorstep, dressed in bright pink Lululemon gear, a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. "Good morning, family," she chirped. "I come bearing road trip snacks and entertainment for the munchkin." My blood ran cold. The audacity to come into my home after the previous night, smiling at my husband, smiling at me. "Chloe, what a surprise," I said, walking to the door. I didn't hug her. I stood my ground, blocking her full entry. "Well, you sounded so stressed last week," she said, her eyes darting between Mark and me. "I thought I'd come see you off, help with the last-minute packing chaos." "That's so thoughtful of you," I said, my voice dripping with a sweetness I didn't feel. "But there's no chaos. We're all under control." I turned to Mark. "Honey, can you double-check that we have Lily's allergy medicine? I'll be back from the office before you know it." I saw the look that passed between them, a flicker of panic. They wanted me here, where they could watch me. "Are you sure you have to go, Nat?" Chloe asked, feigning concern. "You look exhausted. Let Mark go." "Oh, it's nothing he could handle," I said breezily, grabbing my purse and the innocuous folder of documents I'd left on the hall table. My cover story. "It's company business. Dull as dirt. I'll be back before you've even finished your coffee." I leaned down and kissed Lily. "Be good for Daddy. Mommy will be right back." I walked out the door, feeling their eyes on my back. Every step away from that house felt like a victory. I wasn't going to the office. I was going to war. And my first battle was with a lawyer who billed in 6-minute increments. Arthur Finch's office was a monument to old money and discretion. I was ushered in through the back. "As requested, Natalie," Arthur said, standing up from his massive oak desk. He was a man in his late 60s, with a perfectly tailored suit and eyes that missed nothing. You look like hell. I feel like it. Arthur, sit down. This is going to be comprehensive. For the next hour, I laid it out. Not the emotional affair, not the hurt. I gave him the facts, cold and hard, as if I were presenting a business case for a hostile takeover defense. I told him what I'd heard, verbatim. The trail, the drop, the insurance, the company shares. Arthur listened without interruption, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, the only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. I see, he said finally. He leaned forward. You understand the position this puts me in. What you've told me is alarming, but it's hearsay. It's not evidence. I know that, I said, my voice steady. I'm not asking you to go to the police. I'm asking you to help me build a fortress. I want a new will. Today. I want everything, the life insurance, my shares, the real estate, the liquid assets, locked away in trust so airtight that if I so much as trip on a curb, Mark and Chloe end up with nothing but a lengthy and expensive legal battle they will inevitably lose. I want my brother, David, named as the sole executor and Lily's guardian. I want it stipulated that if I die under any circumstances deemed suspicious or accidental, the entire estate is frozen pending an independent investigation. A slow, grim smile spread across Arthur's face. He loved this stuff. We can do that. The interim clause. It's designed to discourage exactly this kind of beneficiary misconduct. It's beautiful, in a morbid sort of way. He started typing furiously on his computer. We'll need to move your assets. Now, the bank won't be happy about a Saturday morning emergency session, but they owe me favors. Good. There's one more thing. What? I need you to draw up divorce papers. Arthur stopped typing and looked at me. Natalie, if you file for divorce now, it tips your hand completely. It could provoke him. I'm not filing them now. I said, I'm having them drawn up. I want them ready to file the moment I give the word. I want it to be my next move. When I choose to make it, he nodded slowly, understanding. A sword, not just a shield. Exactly. I spent the next 2 hours with Arthur and a notary he miraculously produced, signing documents that systematically dismantled the future Mark and Chloe had so carefully planned. With every signature, I felt a piece of my power returning. When I finally stood to leave, Arthur walked me to the door. Natalie, he said, his hand on my shoulder. It was the closest he'd ever come to a gesture of affection. Be careful. A cornered animal is a dangerous one. I'm counting on it, Arthur, I said, my smile feeling sharp and real for the first time all morning. I'm counting on it. I left his office. The signed, notarized will tucked securely in my bag. It was 9:25 a.m. Time to go home. Time to smile at my husband. Time to pack for a family vacation. I had my shield. Now I needed to go and bait the trap. The drive to Lake Tahoe should have been beautiful. The further we got from the city, the more the landscape opened up into the rugged grandeur of the Sierras. But every pine tree, every glimpse of the distant, blue-hazed peaks felt like a threat. The scenic route was just the pathway to my planned execution. I sat in the passenger seat of Mark's Range Rover, pretending to doze behind my sunglasses. Lily was chattering away in the back, headphones on, watching a movie on the seatback screen. It gave Mark and me the illusion of privacy, a space filled with attention, so thick it was a miracle the airbags didn't deploy. You're quiet, Mark said, his voice carefully light. He reached over and squeezed my knee. I forced my leg not to flinch, just tired. I murmured, letting my head loll against the headrest, and finally letting myself relax. I think it's been a hell of a week. Well, you've earned it. For days of pure nothing. Hiking, reading, maybe even a couple's massage at the resort spa. He said it with such easy charm. The concerned husband, planning a romantic getaway. I wondered if he'd practiced the line in front of the mirror. A massage sounds heavenly. I lied. The thought of a stranger's hands on my body, of being vulnerable and relaxed, made my skin crawl. Vulnerability was a luxury I could no longer afford. I was looking at the trail maps last night. He continued, as if the idea had just occurred to him. There's one that looks incredible. The Serpent's Pass Trail. It starts right near the rental house, supposed to have the most breathtaking views of the entire lake from the summit. There it is. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird in a cage. Serpent's Pass. It sounded like the kind of place where a tragic accident would be all too believable. Oh yeah, I kept my voice neutral. Drowsy. Is it strenuous? The guide said it was moderate. A bit of a climb, but worth it. We could go first thing tomorrow morning. Catch the sunrise. Just you and me. We could ask Chloe to keep an eye on Lily. He glanced at me. A quick, searching look. She offered. Said she'd be happy to help. Of course she did. The pieces slid into place with a sickening click. Get me alone on a moderate trail at sunrise. A misplaced step, a loose rock, a frantic 911 call from a grieving husband, and Chloe, the devoted friend, there to comfort him and care for the motherless child. It was tidy. It was perfect. Just you and me. I repeated softly. I let a slow smile spread across my face, turning my head to look at him. That sounds really romantic. Mark. The relief on his face was palpable. He thought I was taking the bait. Great. It's a date. Then, we arrived at the rental house a few hours later. It was a massive, modern A-frame cabin, all glass and steel, perched precariously on the mountainside with a stunning, dizzying view of the lake. The beauty was undeniable and utterly sinister. Every feature seemed designed for a catastrophe. The huge deck with its low railing, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the steep, rocky incline the house was built upon. Wow, Daddy, it's a castle, Lily yelled, scrambling out of the car. It sure is. Sweetheart, Mark said, hefting a suitcase. He grinned at me. I splurged a little. Thought we deserved it. You splurged with my money, Dad, I thought. On my tomb. We unpacked the car. I made a show of being the tired, scatterbrained wife. Honey, can you grab my toiletry bag? I think I left it on the bathroom counter at home. I hadn't. It was in my suitcase, but I needed a moment alone. While he went back outside to check the car, I slipped into the master bedroom on the top floor. The view was even more terrifying from up here. I walked out onto the private balcony. The railing came up to my waist. It felt solid enough. I gave it a firm, casual-looking shake. It didn't budge. Okay, so the balcony was probably not plan A. Good to know. I looked down. The ground fell away sharply into a thick grove of pine trees. A fall from here would be fatal, but getting me out alone on a trail was cleaner, less chance of evidence, more plausible deniability. I heard Mark's footsteps on the stairs and moved quickly back inside, pretending to be admiring the bedding. No toiletry bag, he said, coming into the room. You must have packed it. Oh, you're right. I'm losing my mind, I said with a laugh. It's right here. I pulled it out of my suitcase. See? Harmless. Clueless. The perfect victim. The rest of the afternoon was an exercise in surreal normalcy. We built a fire. We made hot chocolate for Lily. Mark built a snowman with her in the patchy snow outside while I watched from the window. He was a good father. That was the part that kept threatening to crack my resolve. The love he had for Lily was real. It was the one thing about this entire nightmare that felt true. It was also his greatest vulnerability, and I knew, with a cold certainty, that I would use it against him if I had to. As dusk began to settle, painting the lake in shades of orange and purple, Mark's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and then at me. It's Chloe. She's in town. Wants to know if we need anything from the store before she comes up. My skin prickled. She was here. The wolf was at the door. Invite her for dinner, I said, my voice bright. The least we can do after she drove all the way up here to help with Lily tomorrow. Mark looked momentarily thrown. I'm sure they'd planned a more discreet meeting. Are you sure? You must be exhausted. Nonsense. It'll be fun. It's been ages since the three of us hung out. I walked over and squeezed his arm. Let me just freshen up. In the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, taking deep, shuddering breaths. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was pale, with shadows under her eyes, but her gaze was steady, hard. I pulled the small, discreet audio recorder from my pocket, a high-tech little gadget I'd picked up from a spy shop on the way to Arthur's office. I checked the battery. Full. I hit record and slipped it into the front pocket of my jeans. It was time to start collecting evidence. Chloe arrived 20 minutes later, laden with grocery bags and a bottle of expensive wine. I come bearing gifts, she announced, sweeping into the living room like she owned the place. She hugged Mark, a little too long, and then turned to me. Natalie, you look well, she said, her eyes scanning me with a clinical sharpness that belied her smile. I feel great, I said, pulling her into a hug that was all air and no substance. Finally unwound. Thank you so much for coming up. It means the world to us. Anything for you guys, she said, her voice oozing false sincerity. And for this little munchkin. She swooped down and scooped up a giggling Lily. Are you ready for a sleepover with Auntie Chloe tomorrow while Mom and Dad go on their hike? Yes, Lily yelled. We're gonna make pancakes. That we are, Chloe said, smiling at me over Lily's head, a smile that said, enjoy your last breakfast. During dinner, I steered the conversation. I played the part of the grateful, relaxed wife to perfection. I praised Mark for finding the amazing rental. I thanked Chloe for her friendship, and I kept bringing the topic back to the hike. So, this serpent's pass, I said, taking a sip of wine. Tell me more. Is it safe? I'm such a klutz. Oh, it's perfectly safe, Mark said a little too quickly, as long as you watch your step. There's one section that's a bit narrow, but the views are supposed to be worth it. Narrow. I feigned nervousness. How narrow? It's fine. Chloe interjected, reaching over to pat my hand. I had to stop myself from snatching it away. Mark would never let anything happen to you. It's supposed to be one of the most beautiful spots in Tahoe. The perfect place to reconnect. She took a slow drink of her wine. Her eyes locked on mine over the rim of the glass. The subtext was as clear as the mountain air. The perfect place to die. Well, when you put it that way, I said, letting my shoulders relax. A sunrise hike to reconnect. It does sound perfect. I looked at Mark and gave him a warm, loving smile. The smile of a woman completely unaware she was walking into a death trap. I can't wait. Later, after Lily was in bed and the dishes were done, we were all sitting by the fireplace. The mood was strangely convivial. Mark and Chloe were giddy, a nervous energy buzzing between them. They thought they'd won. The trap was set, and the dumb animal was walking right into it. I saw my opening. I stretched and yawned. I'm beat. That wine really did me in. I think I'm going to turn in. I stood up and kissed the top of Mark's head. Don't stay up too late. You too. Big day tomorrow. I walked upstairs, my every sense on high alert. I didn't go into the bedroom. I stood at the top of the stairs, in the dark, and listened. The recorder in my pocket was still running. For a minute, there was only the crackle of the fire. Then, I heard Chloe's voice, low and excited. She's really going for it. She didn't suspect a thing. I told you, Mark replied, his voice a smug murmur. She's so exhausted. She's not thinking straight. She's just happy to be taken care of for once. By this time tomorrow, it'll all be over. We'll be free. We'll be rich. Mark corrected her. Now, you remember the plan for tomorrow? You keep Lily occupied. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay here with her. Your alibi is that you were making pancakes. I know. I know. Don't worry. It's all going to go smoothly. I crept back into the bedroom, my heart pounding not with fear, but with a fierce, cold triumph. I had it. Their voices, their confirmation of the plan, the location, the alibi. It was all on the recorder. I got ready for bed, my movements slow and deliberate. When Mark finally came up, I was pretending to be asleep. He slid into bed beside me, his body a line of heat against my back. I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, until his breathing evened out into the rhythm of sleep. Then, and only then, I allowed myself a small, grim smile in the darkness. They thought the trap was set for me, but as I lay there, listening to my husband sleep, I knew with absolute certainty that I was the one who had laid the trap, and at sunrise, I was going to spring it. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., a harsh, invasive sound in the pre-dawn darkness. Mark stirred beside me, his arms slung heavily across my waist. For a single, disorienting second, the warmth of him felt familiar, safe. Then the memory of the recorded conversation, their giddy voices, crashed down on me, washing away any last vestige of sentimental fog. I slipped out from under his arm, my movements silent and practiced. Time for our adventure, I whispered, feigning excitement. He groaned, rolling over. 5 more minutes. Not a chance. I said, my voice light. We don't want to miss the sunrise. Your meticulously planned backdrop for my murder. I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower, not to get in, but to mask the sound of my next move. I retrieved the audio recorder from its hiding place in my toiletry bag. The little red light glowed steadily. Full battery. I opened a secure, encrypted cloud storage app on my phone and uploaded the file, labeling it with the date and a seemingly innocuous code. Tahoe_hike_audio_1. I then set the app to auto-upload any new recordings from this device every 15 minutes. If anything happened to me, if my phone was destroyed, the evidence would be safe in a digital vault only Arthur Finch and I could access. Satisfied, I slipped the recorder back into my pocket. My shield was now also a weapon. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, Mark was up, pulling on his hiking gear. He looked tense, his jaw tight. Nerves. Good. Let him be nervous. Ready? He asked, forcing a smile. Almost. I just need to stretch my ankle a bit. I must have twisted it yesterday carrying the luggage. It was a lie. My ankles were fine, but I made a show of rotating my right foot, wincing slightly. Oof, it's a little sore. His smile faltered. Are you sure you're up for this? It's a pretty serious hike. We don't have to go. The concern in his voice was so expertly crafted. The perfect, caring husband. But I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. His perfect plan, threatened already. Oh, no, I'll be fine, I insisted, waving a dismissive hand. A little stretch and some Advil will sort it out. I'm not missing this. I leaned against the doorframe, continuing to gently massage my ankle. You know, it's funny. I was talking to Sarah Chen before we left. She was telling me about her cousin who fell on a hike up here last year. Not even a hard trail, just a freak accident. Slipped on a wet patch, broke his leg in 2 places. He was alone. Took them 6 hours to find him. I watched his face closely. A muscle in his cheek twitched. That's terrible, he said, turning away to lace up his boots. But we'll be together, and we'll be careful. Of course, I said softly. It just makes you think, doesn't it? How life can change in an instant. One wrong step. I let the words hang in the air, heavy with implication. He finished with his boots and stood up, his back to me. We should get going. Downstairs. Chloe was already in the kitchen, pretending to busily prepare for the pancake breakfast with Lily. She was wearing a silk robe, not mine, this time, but the effect was the same. It felt like a violation. Good morning. You too, she chirped, her eyes gleaming with a predatory excitement she couldn't quite conceal. All set for your big hike? We are, Mark said, his voice a little too loud. He walked over and gave her a quick, brotherly peck on the cheek. The performance for my benefit was nauseating. You've got everything under control here? Absolutely. Lily and I are going to have a fantastic morning. Don't you worry about a thing. She looked at me, her head tilted. You look a little pale. Nat, everything okay? Just a bit of a sore ankle, I said, leaning on the kitchen island for effect. But I'm sure the fresh mountain air will fix it. Her smile tightened. Ankle? That's no good. Maybe you should postpone the hike. Stay here with me and Lily. Safety first. The concern was so thick. I could almost taste it. They were a tag team, working me from both sides. Mark with false care, Chloe with false friendship. They needed me on that trail. Oh, I'll be fine, I said, repeating my line. I limped ever so slightly as I went to pour a glass of water. It's probably just a cramp. I'd be more upset sitting here, knowing I was missing those famous views Mark's been raving about. I saw the look that passed between them, a silent negotiation. Is she faking? Is this a problem? Mark gave a barely perceptible shake of his head. Proceed. Okay, if you're sure, Chloe said, her voice dripping with fake reluctance. But be careful. We will, Mark said, grabbing his keys. Ready. Honey? I took a long sip of water, my eyes meeting Chloe's over the rim of the glass. I held her gaze for a second too long, letting my own smile fade into something neutral, unreadable. I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes before she looked away. Flustered. Ready, I said. The drive to the trailhead was short and silent. The sky was beginning to lighten from black to a deep, bruised purple. The world was utterly still. Mark parked the car in the empty gravel lot. The trailhead sign for Serpent's Pass loomed in the headlights. The cartoonish serpent graphic seemed to leer at us. Mark killed the engine. The silence was absolute. Well, he said, clapping his hands together, this is it. I didn't move. I stared straight ahead at the dark mouth of the trail, a narrow gap in the pines that looked like it led into oblivion. You know, I said, my voice quiet in the stillness. It's funny. Last night, after I went to bed, I couldn't sleep, so I came back downstairs to get some water. I felt him go rigid beside me. I turned my head slowly to look at him. His face was pale in the dim light. You and Chloe were talking by the fire. I continued, my tone conversational. You sounded so happy. His breath hitched. Natalie, I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I interrupted, holding up a hand. I gave him a gentle, understanding smile, the smile of a forgiving wife. It's okay, Mark. Really. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and confusion. What did you hear? I leaned closer, as if to share a secret. The recorder in my pocket felt warm against my leg. I heard you two talking about how excited you were for this trip, for the future. I paused, letting the suspense build. You said, by this time tomorrow, it'll all be over. We'll be free. The color drained completely from his face. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Natalie, I can explain. I placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. My touch was gentle, but my eyes were hard. You don't have to. Mark, I get it. He was trembling now. You do? Of course, I said, my voice soft as silk. I've been so wrapped up in work, so distant. I heard you two talking about finally being free of all that stress, free to start a new chapter. I let my finger drop, and I realized you were right. This hike, it's a new beginning for us, isn't it? A chance to leave all the baggage behind. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it was almost comical. He thought I was still clueless. He thought I had misinterpreted their conversation in the most naively generous way possible. He grabbed my hands, his own cold and clammy. Yes, exactly. Natalie, a new beginning. That's all I want. I squeezed his hands, my smile never wavering. Me too. Honey, me too. I released him and opened the car door. The cold morning air hit me like a slap. So, let's not waste another second. Let's go make our new beginning. I stepped out of the car, leaving him sitting there, stunned and scrambling to recover. I had taken his moment of supreme confidence and turned it into a moment of sheer, pants-wetting terror. And then, with a few well-chosen words, I had handed him back his hope, making him believe his plan was still on track. He thought he was leading a lamb to the slaughter. He had no idea the lamb was armored, and had just laid its own trap. As I stood at the entrance to the Serpent's Pass, looking into the shadows, I felt a surge of power. The hunt was on, and for the first time, Mark was the one who had no idea what was coming next. The drive back to the rental house was a study in suffocating silence. Mark white-knuckled the steering wheel, his gaze fixed rigidly on the winding mountain road. The cheerful facade he'd maintained on the way to the trailhead had completely crumbled, replaced by a sullen, simmering tension. I kept my face turned towards the window, but my reflection in the glass showed a woman who was calm, collected, and terrifyingly in control. He had tried to kill me. The thought was no longer a shocking revelation, but a cold, hard fact, and he had failed, miserably. I still don't see why you had to be so dramatic, he finally muttered, breaking the silence. That one wrong step bit. You scared the hell out of me. I turned my head slowly to look at him. Did I? I was just being cautious. After what happened to Sarah's cousin, it really stuck with me. Funny how the mind works, isn't it? You hear a story, and suddenly you see danger everywhere. His jaw tightened. He knew I was playing with him, but he couldn't call me on it without admitting why my words had struck such a nerve. Well, it's over now. Let's just forget it. Forget our romantic sunrise hike? I asked, my voice dripping with false sweetness. Oh, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Mark. It was transformative. He shot me a quick, suspicious glance before turning his eyes back to the road. We didn't speak another word until he pulled into the driveway of the rental house. The scene that greeted us was not the one I'm sure he'd envisioned. There was no weeping Chloe, no frantic calls to 911. Instead, Lily was sitting at the kitchen island, happily eating pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. And standing next to her, a spatula in hand and a look of grim satisfaction on his face, was my brother, David. My heart leaped into my throat. My plan was working. Uncle David, Lily shrieked, scrambling off her stool and running to hug him again, as if he'd been gone for years instead of 2 minutes. Hey, Munchkin, David said, scooping her up. His eyes, however, were locked on me and Mark as we walked through the door. They were the same shade of blue as mine, but where mine were often clouded with work fatigue. His were sharp, clear, and missed nothing. He took in my hiking clothes, my calm demeanor, and then Mark's pale, strained face. Chloe was hovering by the coffee machine, her own face a mask of barely concealed panic and confusion. The script had been torn up, and she had no idea what her lines were supposed to be. David, Mark said, his voice strangled with shock. What are you doing here? David set Lily down and walked towards us. He was an inch shorter than Mark, but built like a linebacker. He didn't offer a handshake or a hug. He just stopped, feet planted, and crossed his arms. Nice to see you too, Mark, he said, his tone deceptively mild. He looked at me. You weren't answering your phone. Nat, I got worried. You said you'd call when you got in last night. I allowed a look of contrite surprise to cross my face. Oh, David, I'm so sorry. It was such a late night. And then this morning we were up at the crack of dawn for a hike. It completely slipped my mind. I walked over and gave him a quick hug, a hug that was genuine on my part. I whispered, so only he could hear, play along. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod against my shoulder. A hike? David said, pulling back and raising an eyebrow. You? The woman who considers walking from her desk to the coffee machine her daily cardio? I forced a laugh. I know, right? Mark convinced me. Serpents pass. For the sunrise. I turned to Mark. Wasn't it breathtaking? Honey, Mark looked like a deer caught in headlights. Ah, yeah, breathtaking. David's gaze swept over Mark again, noting the sweat still damp on his temple. The way his hands were shoved deep into his pockets to hide their trembling. Serpents pass? That's a gnarly trail. You guys okay? You both look a little peaked. It was more challenging than I expected, I admitted, pouring myself a cup of coffee. My hand was steady. There was one spot that was really narrow. Gave me a bit of a scare. To be honest, I almost lost my balance. The air in the room went cold. Chloe made a small, choked sound and turned away, busying herself with the coffee machine. David's eyes narrowed. You fell. No, no, I said quickly, waving a hand. Just a slip. Mark was right there. He caught me. I smiled at my husband. A slow, deliberate smile. He's always there to catch me. Aren't you? Honey? Mark's Adams apple-bobbed as he swallowed hard. He couldn't speak. He just gave a jerky nod. David was silent for a long moment, his eyes flicking from my calm face to Mark's terrified one, to Chloe's rigid back. He was putting the pieces together. He might not have had the whole picture, but he could see the jagged edges, and he knew they were sharp. Well, David said, clapping his hands together, making everyone jump. I'm starving. Those pancakes smell great. Chloe, was it? Thank you for taking care of breakfast. He walked over to the island and sat down next to Lily, effectively inserting himself into the center of the dysfunctional dynamic. So, what's the plan for the day? Since your big hike is already done. The question hung in the air. Mark and Chloe looked utterly lost. Their entire schedule, the alibi, the emotional aftermath, the slow, manipulative grooming of Lily for a life without me had just been obliterated by the uninvited presence of my 220-pound, deeply suspicious brother. I hadn't really thought. Mark stammered. Well, we've got to make the most of it, David said, his voice booming with a false cheer that matched my own. How about we all go into town? Walk around the village? My treat for lunch. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Chloe interjected quickly, finding her voice. Natalie must be exhausted after her early morning. Nonsense, I said, echoing David's tone. I feel great, invigorated. A day in town sounds perfect. I looked at Mark, challenging him. Doesn't it, honey? A nice, normal, family day. The words normal and family tasted like ash in my mouth, but I saw the effect they had. They trapped him. To object would be to act suspiciously in front of a witness. David was no longer just my brother. He was a human shield, a chaperone. His presence made any further accident logistically impossible. Mark forced a smile that was more of a grimace. Sure, whatever you want. Natalie, great, it's settled, David said, shoveling a forkful of pancake into his mouth. He winked at Lily. You and me. Kid, we're gonna find the biggest ice cream sundae in Tahoe. As Lily cheered, I allowed myself to truly look at my brother. He was here. I hadn't realized how alone I'd felt until this moment, how the weight of my secret had been slowly crushing me. Now, the burden was shared. I had an ally on the inside. Later, as we were all getting ready to leave, I found a moment alone with David in the hallway upstairs. How bad is it? He asked quietly. All pretense gone. His voice was low and serious. Worse than you can imagine. I whispered back. The hike wasn't an accident. He brought me up there to push me off a cliff. David's face went stony. A murderous glint flashed in his eyes. I'll kill him. No, I said, grabbing his arm. You won't. That's not the plan. The plan is to make him wish he were dead. And I need your help. What do you need me to do? Just be here, I said. Your presence changes everything. It neutralizes them. Watch them. David, watch how they are together when they think no one is looking. He nodded. His jaw clenched. I'm not going anywhere. Nat, you should have called me sooner. I know, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I'm calling you now. Downstairs. We regrouped. Mark and Chloe stood together, a united front of miserable tension. Lily was bouncing with excitement, clutching David's hand. Ready? I asked, my voice bright. As we filed out the door, I caught Mark's eye. The look he gave me was no longer just fear or confusion. It was the first flicker of real, dawning comprehension. He was starting to realize that the woman he'd married, the woman he'd thought he could easily dispose of, was gone. And in her place was someone he didn't know at all. The game had changed, and for the first time, I was winning. The day in Tahoe Village was a special kind of hell disguised as a family outing. The sun was obnoxiously bright, the lake is stunning, impossible blue, and the tourists were relentlessly cheerful. We were a grotesque parody of a happy family. David, the fun uncle, lifting a giggling Lily onto his shoulders, me, the smiling wife, threading my arm through Mark's, and Mark and Chloe, trailing behind us like ghosts, their faces pinched with a mixture of fear and rage. Every interaction was a minefield. Let's get a picture, I'd say, pulling out my phone. David, can you take it? Get all of us in. I'd position myself in the center, pulling a stiff, resistant Mark to one side and a pale Chloe to the other. I'd smile broadly for the camera. While they looked like they were posing for a mugshot, I made sure to send the best ones to Sarah Chen and a few other friends with chirpy captions. Tahoe trip with the whole crew. So lucky to have my brother David and bestie Chloe here to share the fun, the subtext, witnesses. Everyone, there are witnesses, was a message I knew Mark would receive loud and clear. Lunch was a tense affair at a noisy lakeside grill. David dominated the conversation, telling loud, boisterous stories from our childhood, effectively preventing any meaningful or damning conversation between Mark and Chloe. I played along, adding embellishments, laughing a little too hard. We were a team, and our performance was flawless. Mark picked at his food. Chloe excused herself to the bathroom 3 times. Each time she returned, her eyes were red-rimmed. During a lull, while David was showing Lily the boats on the lake, Mark leaned close to me, his voice a low, venomous hiss. What is this? Natalie, what are you doing? I turned to him, my face a mask of innocent confusion. What do you mean? Honey, I'm having a nice day with my family. Isn't this what you wanted? A relaxing vacation? His eyes searched mine, desperate to find a crack in the facade. This isn't relaxing. This is a circus. And why is David really here? Because he loves us, I said simply, my voice dripping with sincerity. He was worried. It's sweet, don't you think, that we have so many people who care about us? I reached over and patted his hand. It was cold as ice. Try to enjoy it. Mark, it's a beautiful day. I saw the fury flash in his eyes. A quick, uncontrolled blaze before he banked it. He was losing his grip. Good. The car ride home was even worse than the mornings. Lily, exhausted from the sun and excitement, fell asleep instantly. The rest of us were trapped in a rolling prison of silence. David, in the passenger seat, had stopped pretending to be cheerful. He just stared out the window, his profile stern and unreadable. He was observing, just as I'd asked. When we got back to the rental, I announced I was putting Lily down for a nap. It was an excuse, and David knew it. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. Up in Lily's room, I tucked her in, my heart aching with a love so fierce it was painful. I kissed her forehead, breathing in her sleepy scent. I will never let anything happen to you, I whispered. It was a prayer and a promise. I crept out and went to my own bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. I didn't have to wait long. A few minutes later, There was a soft tap, and David slipped inside, closing the door behind him. The moment we were alone, the carefully constructed calm I'd maintained all day shattered. A tremor ran through my hands. David saw it and crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling me into a fierce, silent hug. I let myself lean into him for just a second, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Okay," he said, his voice a low rumble in my ear. "Enough of this bullshit. Talk to me. Now." I pulled away, wiping a stray tear I hadn't even felt escape. I walked to my purse, retrieved the small audio recorder, and handed it to him. "Put in your earbuds," I instructed, my voice steadying. "Start from the beginning." I watched his face as he listened. I saw the progression of emotions. Initial confusion, then dawning horror, then a cold, hard anger that settled into the lines around his eyes. He listened to the entire recording from the study, and then the one from last night by the fireplace. When he was done, he slowly pulled the earbuds out. His knuckles were white where he gripped the tiny device. "That son of a bitch," he whispered, the words vibrating with fury. He looked at me, his eyes full of a pained understanding. "The hike this morning, he actually tried to." He led me to the edge. I confirmed, my voice flat. He was behind me. I felt his hand on my back. "David, it was just for a second, a test, but I knew." So I turned around and gave him that speech about one wrong step. I took away his moment. I made him afraid. A grim smile touched David's lips. "Jesus, Nat, you have ice water in your veins." The admiration in his voice was unmistakable. "What's the plan? Do we call the police?" "I'll drag him down to the station myself." "Not yet," I said, shaking my head. "It's still my word against his. This recording is good. It's a start, but a good lawyer could argue it's taken out of context. That 'she'll be gone' could mean divorce. We need more. We need irrefutable proof of intent." "Like what?" "Like catching them in the act," I said, my mind racing. "They're desperate now. You being here has completely screwed their timeline. They'll try something else, something sooner, and it has to look like an accident. We need to be ready." David ran a hand over his face. "This is insane. We should just get you and Lily out of here. Now, pack a bag and we'll go." "And then what?" I challenged. "I spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. He'll still have access to my money, to the company. He'll still be a part of Lily's life. No, I'm not running. I'm finishing this." He studied me for a long moment, seeing the determination in my eyes. He'd seen that look before, back when we were kids, and I decided I was going to win the science fair, or when I was building Nexus Path from the ground up. It was the look that said I would not be moved. "Okay," he said finally, a soldier accepting his orders. "What do you need me to do?" "First, I need you to be my shadow, especially when Mark and I are alone. He won't try anything with you around. Second, I need you to be the fun uncle for Lily. Keep her occupied, happy, and most importantly, safe. If they can't get to me, they might." I couldn't finish the sentence. The thought was too monstrous. David's face darkened. "They wouldn't. We can't take that chance," I said, my voice firm. "Her safety is the only thing that matters. And third, I need you to watch Chloe. She's the weak link. She's nervous. She's not as cool under pressure as Mark thinks he is. If we can get her to crack, she'll turn on him to save herself." David nodded, his mind already working. "I can do that. I'll be your guard dog." He managed a small, grim smile. "So, the fun uncle is also the attack dog." "I can multitask." "I know you can." I reached out and squeezed his arm. "Thank you, David, for coming, for believing me. Always." Nat, his expression softened. God, I can't believe he'd do this. I always thought he was a bit of a prick. But this, I know," I said, the full weight of the betrayal settling over me again. I loved him. I trusted him with everything. And it was all a lie. I took a deep breath, pushing the hurt aside. There was no room for it now. But that's our advantage. He thinks I'm the same naive workaholic he married. He has no idea who he's really dealing with. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. David and I froze, our eyes locking. Had someone been listening? The sound was soft, furtive. David moved first, stepping silently to the door and yanking it open. The hallway was empty, but as we looked down, we both saw it, a single, long, blonde hair, caught on the rough wood of the doorframe. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Lily's. It was Chloe's. David bent down, picked it up, and held it between his fingers. He looked at me, his eyes hard. The game had just gotten more dangerous. They knew we were talking. They knew we were planning. But now, we knew they were listening. The uneasy alliance was formed. The battle lines were drawn. And the war for my life had just begun. The discovery of Chloe's hair on the doorframe changed everything. The subtle, psychological warfare was over. They knew we were onto them, and we knew they were getting reckless. The house was no longer just a vacation rental. It was a battlefield, and every room felt like a potential ambush point. Dinner that night was a tense, silent affair. David had positioned himself at the table, so he had a clear view of both Mark and Chloe. I focused on Lily, cutting her chicken into small pieces, my ears straining for any sound, any hint of their next move. It was Chloe who finally broke the silence. Her voice was too bright, too forced. So, David, Natalie tells me you're in construction. That must be fascinating work. David took a slow sip of water, his eyes never leaving her face. It's a job. You build things. Sometimes you have to tear things down that aren't safe. He let the words hang in the air. You have to be able to spot the weak points before the whole structure collapses. Chloe's smile wavered. Mark shot her a warning look. I think it's going to storm tonight, Mark said, abruptly changing the subject. He gestured towards the large windows. The sky had indeed darkened, and the wind was picking up, whipping the surface of the lake into white caps. Looks like a big one. A good night to stay in, I said lightly. Board games by the fire. Exactly, Mark said, his eyes meeting mine. There was a new intensity in them, a grim determination that hadn't been there before. The scared rabbit was gone, replaced by a cornered wolf. No one should be outside in this. The rest of the evening passed with a surreal normality. We played Candyland with Lily until her bedtime. The storm arrived with a vengeance, howling around the A-frame, rattling the windows. The power flickered once, twice, and then went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Great, Mark muttered, his voice coming from the couch. I heard the scratch of a match, and a moment later, the room was lit by the flickering glow of the fireplace. It cast long, dancing shadows, turning familiar faces into grotesque masks. I'll check the breaker box, David said, standing up. It's probably in the garage. I'll come with you, Mark said quickly, also rising. No need, David said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You stay here with the girls. I've got a flashlight on my phone. He moved towards the door to the garage, a solid silhouette against the firelight. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the atmosphere in the room thickened. It was just me, Mark, and Chloe. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire, the roar of the wind, and Lily's soft, even breathing from the monitor on the coffee table. Chloe stood up. I'm going to check on Lily, she announced, and hurried up the stairs, leaving me alone with my husband. We sat in silence for a minute, the space between us charged with unspoken threats. You know, Mark said, his voice low and conversational. This reminds me of that storm we had on our honeymoon. In Mexico, remember? The power went out then, too. I remember. I said, my senses on high alert. Why was he bringing up a happy memory now? We hunkered down in our little cabana, just the two of us. It was perfect. He was quiet for a moment. We were happy then, weren't we? Natalie, we were. I said, my guard up. This was a new tactic. Sentimentality. What happened to us? He asked, and the genuine sounding pain in his voice was almost convincing. You tell me, Mark. I replied, my voice cold. You're the one with the new business partner. He flinched as if I'd struck him. The mask of the wounded husband slipped, and the anger flashed through. This isn't about Chloe. This is about you. You and your goddamn company. It's always been your first priority. There was never any room for me. For us. So your solution is to kill me and take it? I shot back, no longer bothering to hide my contempt. That's your grand plan for happiness? You think running Nexus Path will be easier than being married to the person who built it? You have no idea what it takes. I have every idea. He snarled, leaning forward, his face twisted in the firelight. I've been watching you do it for years. I could do it better, without the constant stress, the all-nighters, the neglect. The honesty was shocking. This was the real Mark, the resentful, entitled man who had been festering under the surface of the supportive husband. Before I could respond, a blood-curdling scream ripped through the house from upstairs. It was Chloe. Mark and I both jumped to our feet. My first, primal thought was for Lily. I lunged for the stairs, but Mark was faster, blocking my path. Stay here, he barked. I'll check. Another scream, this one filled with genuine terror. Mark, help. He turned and bolted up the stairs. Every instinct in my body screamed that this was a trap, but the sound of Chloe's panic was too real. I hesitated for a split second, then followed him, my heart hammering against my ribs. The upstairs hallway was dark. The door to Lily's room was ajar. I pushed it open. The room was empty. Lily's bed was rumpled, but she was gone. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. Lily, I screamed. In here. Chloe's voice came from the master bathroom at the end of the hall. It was choked with sobs. I ran, Mark on my heels. The bathroom door was open. The scene inside made my blood run cold. Chloe was backed into a corner, clutching a terrified, crying Lily to her chest. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a black ski mask was advancing on them. He held a large, menacing wrench in his hand. Get away from them, Mark yelled, his voice cracking with fear. The masked man turned. In the dim light from the window, I saw his eyes. They were cold, flat blue. They locked onto me. This wasn't a random burglary. This was for me. He lunged, not at Chloe and Lily, but straight at me. I stumbled backward into the hallway, my mind racing. This was their plan, a home invasion, a tragic, violent end for me. While Mark and Chloe played the heroic defenders, the man was on me in an instant. I smelled sweat and cheap cigarettes. He grabbed the front of my shirt. The wrench raised high. I brought my knee up hard, aiming for his groin. I connected, but the thick layers of his clothing muffled the blow. He grunted in pain, but didn't release me. Get off her, Mark shouted, but he was hanging back, a pathetic spectator to my murder. The wrench started its descent. I twisted, raising my arm to block the blow. It was a futile gesture. This was it. A roar echoed down the hallway. Get the hell away from my sister. A blur of motion slammed into the masked man, tackling him away from me. It was David. They crashed into the wall with a sickening thud. The wrench clattered to the floor. The two men grappled, a chaotic tangle of fists and grunts in the dark hallway. David was bigger, fueled by a pure, protective rage. He landed a solid punch to the man's jaw. I heard a crack. The man cried out, and David used the opportunity to pin him, his knee digging into the man's back. Ned, are you okay? David yelled, not taking his eyes off his captive. I was on the floor, trembling, my arm throbbing where the wrench had grazed it. Lily, I gasped. I've got her. Chloe cried out from the bathroom. She was still holding a sobbing Lily, her face a mask of genuine terror. For a fleeting second, I wondered if she was in on this part of the plan. The fear in her eyes looked real. David ripped the ski mask off the intruder. It was a man I'd never seen before. He had a broken nose that was now bleeding profusely, and a crude snake tattoo coiled around his neck. "Who are you?" David snarled, shaking him. "Who sent you?" The man just glared, spitting a wad of blood onto the floor. Just then, the power flickered back on, flooding the hallway with harsh, revealing light. We all froze, blinking in the sudden brightness. Mark stood a few feet away, pale and shaking. His eyes met mine. In that moment, I saw it all. The plan had gone horribly wrong. The hero had been upstaged. The intruder had been caught. And my brother, the uninvited guest, had just saved my life. The random home invasion was now a very specific attempted murder. And the man with the snake tattoo was the first tangible piece of evidence that Mark and Chloe's plan was very, very real. The stark fluorescent light of the hallway made everything look cheap and surreal. The masked man, now just a bleeding, snarling stranger with a snake tattoo, lay pinned under David's knee. Lily's terrified sobs echoed from the bathroom, where Chloe still held her, both of them trembling. Mark stood frozen, a statue of panic and indecision. It was David who took charge, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through the chaos. "Natalie, the zip ties, in my duffel bag, side pocket." Now, I didn't question him. I ran to his room, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unzip the pocket. I found a handful of heavy-duty plastic zip ties. When I returned, David had wrenched the man's arms behind his back. "Secure his wrists," David instructed, not taking his eyes off the intruder. "Tight." I fumbled, but managed to loop the tie and pull it until it bit into the man's flesh. The final click was unnaturally loud. David quickly bound the man's ankles with another tie, then finally stood up, breathing heavily. He kept his foot planted firmly on the man's back. "Now," David said, his gaze sweeping over the scene before landing squarely on Mark. "Who the hell is he?" "Mark?" Mark flinched, as if struck. "How should I know? He's a burglar who bypassed the ground floor and came straight up to the master bedroom hallway?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. I was cradling my throbbing arm. "A burglar who had a wrench, not a gun. A burglar who ignored Chloe and went straight for me." I took a step towards Mark. "He wasn't here to rob us. He was here for me." "That's insane." Mark's voice cracked. He looked at Chloe, a desperate, pleading look in his eyes. "Chloe, tell them. This was just a random break-in." Chloe stared back at him, her face a pale mask of terror. She was clutching Lily like a lifeline. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked from Mark's desperate face to the tied-up intruder on the floor, to my cold, accusing stare. The weight of the situation was crushing her. Random. David barked a harsh, humorless laugh. He nudged the intruder with his foot. "You. Who paid you?" The man on the floor just glared, spitting more blood onto the beige carpet. "I ain't saying shit." "Fine," David said. He pulled out his phone. "We'll let the police ask." He started dialing. "No." The word exploded from Mark. He lunged forward as if to grab the phone. But David fixed him with a look that could stop a charging bear. Mark froze. "No police." "David," Mark pleaded, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Think of the scandal. Think of Lily. This will traumatize her even more. It was just a burglary that went wrong. He's tied up. He can't hurt anyone. Let's just let him go." The audacity of the suggestion stole my breath. Let him go. Oh, he could finish the job another day? David lowered his phone, his eyes narrowing. "Are you out of your mind? This man attacked your wife. He broke into your house, and you want to let him go?" He took a step toward Mark, his presence physically intimidating. "Why would you want that, Mark?" "Unless you're afraid of what he might say to the cops." The air left the room. The only sound was Lily's whimpers, subsiding into hiccups as Chloe rocked her. Mark's face crumpled. He was cornered, and he knew it. His eyes darted around, looking for an escape that didn't exist. It was Chloe who broke. A low, guttural sob escaped her. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't do this anymore." All eyes turned to her. Mark stared at her, a silent command to shut up, warring with the sheer panic in his eyes. "Can't do what, Chloe?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I walked toward her, slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. "What can't you do anymore?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It was supposed to be an accident. She choked out, clutching Lily tighter. "Just a fall. Clean. This is a monster." She gestured weakly at the man on the floor. The confession, vague but damning, hung in the air. Mark looked like he'd been gut-punched. "Chloe, for God's sake, be quiet," he roared. "It's over. Mark," she screamed back, her voice shrill with hysteria. "Don't you see? It's over." He was supposed to make it look like an accident during the break-in. Not this. She dissolved into incoherent sobs. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They had hired this man to stage a burglary that would end with my accidental death, a fall down the stairs. Perhaps a clean, plausible tragedy. But the thug had gotten overzealous. Or maybe Mark's instructions had been deliberately vague, allowing for a more direct approach. I looked down at the man with the snake tattoo. "How much did he pay you?" I asked quietly. The man on the floor looked from me to Mark's ashen face. He saw a sinking ship. 10 grand. He grunted. "Half up front. Said the lady would be an easy target." He was wrong. He shot a look of pure hatred at David. "Liar," Mark shouted, but the word was weak. Pathetic. David had his phone to his ear again. This time, he didn't stop. "Yes, I need to report a breaking and entering and an attempted murder," he said, his voice crisp and clear. He gave the address. "The suspect is detained. Send an ambulance. As well, the perpetrator has a facial injury." He listened for a moment. "Know the homeowner, Mark Bennington, is fine, but I think your detectives are going to want to have a very long talk with him and his friend." He locked eyes with Mark as he said the last word. The next hour was a blur of flashing red and blue lights. The cabin was soon swarming with police and paramedics. The intruder, whose name we learned was Vince, was read his rights and carthed off to the hospital under guard. I gave a statement, sticking to the facts: the power outage, the scream, the attack. I pointedly mentioned that my husband had suggested letting the assailant go. I watched as 2 detectives, a seasoned man named Detective Miller and his younger partner, separated Mark and Chloe, taking them to different rooms for questioning. Chloe was crying hysterically. Mark was blustering, trying to play the part of the outraged, confused husband. David stood by my side the entire time, a solid, immovable presence. He gave his statement with the calm precision of a man who knew how to deal with authority. Detective Miller, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, came over to me after speaking with Mark. "Mrs. Bennington," she said, her voice low, "your husband's story is inconsistent. He's very concerned about the insurance implications of all this." "I'm sure he is," I said, meeting her gaze. She studied my face for a long moment. "Your brother says you have some concerns about your husband's recent behavior." I took a deep breath. It was time. The home invasion had given me the perfect opening. "Detective Miller," I said, my voice low but steady. "This wasn't a random break-in. This was the second attempt on my life this weekend." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "The second? The first was yesterday morning," I said. "On the Serpent's Pass trail, my husband led me to a particularly dangerous precipice. I believe he intended to push me." "Do you have any proof of this?" she asked, her tone neutral. "Not physical proof," I admitted. but I have audio recordings of my husband and Ms. Du Bois discussing my death in this very house. They talk about an accident, an insurance policy, and taking control of my company. Detective Miller's professional calm cracked for just a second, revealing a flicker of intense interest. Audio recordings. She repeated, on my lawyer's server. I said, Arthur Finch. I can have him send them to you. I also have evidence of my husband's financial misconduct at my company, Nexus Path. I believe he's embezzled funds and is desperate to cover his tracks. I was handing her a case on a silver platter. Attempted murder, conspiracy, financial crimes. Detective Miller nodded slowly, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the scene with new understanding. I think, Mrs. Bennington, she said quietly, that you and I need to have a very long talk downtown. She glanced at David, and your brother should come, too. As I followed her out to the patrol car, I passed the room where Mark was being questioned. Our eyes met through the doorway. The bluster was gone. The panic was gone. All that was left was a cold, stark terror. He knew the walls were closing in. The perfect plan had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. He had wanted me gone. Instead, he had handed me the keys to his destruction. The hunter was now the hunted. The police station in South Lake Tahoe was a study in controlled chaos, a stark contrast to the serene mountain landscape outside. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bleaching the color from everything. I sat in a small, sterile interview room, a scratchy wool blanket draped over my shoulders despite my insistence that I didn't need it. A female officer had offered me coffee, but my hands were still shaking too badly to hold a cup. David sat beside me, a solid, silent bulwark. He hadn't left my side since we arrived. Across the scuffed metal table sat Detective Miller. She had a digital recorder placed between us and a notepad open, but her sharp eyes were fixed on me. Okay, Mrs. Bennington, she began, her voice calm and professional. Start from the beginning, and take your time. So I did. I told her everything. I started with the late night at the office, the forgotten files, and the fateful decision to turn back. I recounted, word for word, as best I could remember, the conversation I'd overheard between Mark and Chloe. I saw Detective Miller's pen pause on the notepad when I quoted Mark. She'll be gone, and the inheritance, the company, everything will be ours. And you're certain the word was ours? Miller asked, her tone neutral, positive. I said, my voice firm. It was ours, not mine. He was including Chloe in the plan from the very beginning. I continued, detailing my decision not to confront them, my secret meeting with Arthur Finch, the asset transfers, the new will. I told her about the hike, about Mark leading me to the edge of Serpent's Pass, about the pressure of his hand on my back. I described the constant, subtle tension in the rental house, and the way David's arrival had disrupted their plans. And the audio recordings you mentioned? Miller prompted. I have two, I said. The first is from my husband's study, the night I overheard them. The second is from last night, by the fireplace, where they discussed the plan for the hike, with Chloe providing the alibi with my daughter. I gave her Arthur Finch's contact information. He has the secure files. I can authorize him to release them to you. Detective Miller made a note. We'll be following up with Mr. Finch immediately. She leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Bennington, this is an extraordinary story. The premeditation is staggering. Why do you think they escalated to a home invasion so quickly after the failed hike? Because my brother showed up. David interjected, his voice a low growl. I screwed up their timeline. They thought they had days to stage another accident, a fall in the bathroom, a slip by the lake. My presence meant constant supervision. They got desperate. Miller nodded slowly. That tracks. She looked at me. The intruder, Vince Kowalski, has a record. Burglary. Assault. He's not talking yet, but he will. Men like him always do when the stakes shift from robbery to conspiracy to commit murder. She closed her notepad. I'm going to have an officer take your formal statement. Then, I'd like you to listen to the playback of the recordings when we get them. Confirm the voices. Of course. I said, one more thing. She said, standing up. We've separated Mr. Bennington and Ms. Du Bois. We're interviewing them now, based on what you've told me, and given the inconsistencies in your husband's initial statement about the break-in. I expect we'll be making arrests before the end of the day. The words should have felt like a victory, but all I felt was a hollow, cold exhaustion. An hour later, I was sitting in another room, headphones on, listening to the audio files Arthur had sent, hearing their voices again, so cold, so calculating, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I confirmed it was them, signed the evidence form with a hand that had finally stopped trembling. It was then that Detective Miller came to find me. A grim smile played on her lips. You might want to see this, she said, leading me and David to a room with a one-way mirror. On the other side was Mark. He sat alone at a table, but he wasn't alone for long. The door opened, and Detective Miller's partner escorted Chloe Du Bois into the room. She was crying, her makeup a ruined mess. They sat her down opposite Mark. We could hear everything through the speaker in our room. Chloe, for God's sake, get a hold of yourself. Mark hissed, his voice low and frantic. You can't say anything. You hear me? Nothing. We stick to the story. It was a burglary. Chloe shook her head, sobbing uncontrollably. The story? What story? Mark? The one where you hired a man to kill your wife. The one where you told me it would be clean. Keep your voice down, he snarled, leaning across the table. They have no proof. It's her word against ours. It's circumstantial. They have the recording. Mark, Chloe wailed. Natalie heard us. She has it all on tape. She played us from the beginning. Mark's face went slack with disbelief. That's impossible. She's bluffing. Are you sure? Chloe's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. Are you really sure? Because she knew about the hike. She knew about the cliff. She knew everything. Your perfect plan was a joke to her. I watched, mesmerized, as the alliance shattered before my eyes. The mutual suspicion and blame were a toxic cloud in the small room. This is your fault. Mark snapped, his composure breaking. You were the one who was so impatient. You were the one who said we had to move faster. My fault? Chloe shrieked, standing up so fast her chair screeched back. You're the one who couldn't keep it in his pants. You're the one who was so greedy you couldn't just wait for a divorce. You had to have it all, right now. And you dragged me into this nightmare. Sit down. Ms. Du Bois, a uniformed officer said from the corner, his voice firm. She collapsed back into the chair, burying her face in her hands. I want a lawyer. She mumbled into the table. I'm not saying another word to him. I want a deal. Mark stared at her, his expression a mixture of fury and utter defeat. He knew it was over. Chloe was going to flip. She was going to give them everything in exchange for a lighter sentence. Detective Miller turned to me. As I said, she murmured, they always turn on each other. Just then, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, then back at me. That was the DA's office. We have enough to charge them both with conspiracy to commit murder, based on your testimony and the recordings. The attempted murder charge for Mr. Kowalski's actions is pending, but given the conspiracy, it's a formality. The Financial Crimes Unit is also raiding your company's offices as we speak, looking into the embezzlement you mentioned. She looked through the glass at Mark, who had put his head in his hands. It's done, Mrs. Bennington. They're not going anywhere. I expected to feel triumph, elation. Instead, I felt a profound, bone-deep weariness. The battle was won, but the war had cost me everything I thought I had. My marriage, my best friend, the illusion of a safe and happy life. What happens now? I asked, my voice small. Now, Detective Miller said, her tone softening slightly for the first time. You go home. You take care of your daughter. We'll handle this. There will be arraignments. Trials, it will be a long process. But you're safe now. Safe. The word felt foreign. I looked at David. He put a steadying arm around my shoulders. Let's go get Lily, he said quietly. Let's go home. As we walked out of the police station into the cold, clear Tahoe night, I didn't look back. The past was a prison, and I had just broken free. The future was a terrifying blank slate, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine. The media circus began before we even crossed the city limits into San Francisco. Arthur Finch, anticipating the storm, had arranged for a private car to meet us at a secluded entrance to the Tahoe airport. But it was no use. The news of the Tahoe murder plot had broken, and vans with satellite dishes were parked like vultures outside our Pacific Heights home. Damn, David muttered, peering through the tinted window as our car slowed to a crawl. They're everywhere. He tightened his arm around Lily, who was asleep with her head in his lap, exhausted from the chaos of the last 24 hours. Just get us to the door, I said, my voice flat. I felt numb, insulated from the shouting reporters and the flashbulbs popping against the glass by a thick layer of shock. The fight was over. The adrenaline had drained away, leaving a hollowed-out shell. Our driver and a burly private bodyguard Arthur had also hired. A man named Frank cleared a path. I kept my head down, clutching Lily, while David shielded us from the worst of the onslaught. Natalie, did you know your husband was trying to kill you? Mrs. Bennington, is it true you have recordings? Are you afraid for your life? The questions were a meaningless roar. We burst through the front door, and Frank slammed it shut, leaning against it with a sigh of relief. The house was silent, eerily so. It still smelled of the life I thought I had of Mark's coffee, of Lily's art supplies, of the lavender cleaner our housekeeper used. Now it felt like a museum exhibit. The Bennington home. Before the fall, the first order of business was Lily. She woke up, confused and clingy. Mommy, where's Daddy? Why were all those people outside? My heart shattered. I knelt down, pulling her close. Daddy had to go away for a little while. Sweet pea, I said, the lie tasting like ash. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her father wanted her mother dead? And those people are just confused. They'll go away soon. David, sensing I was at my breaking point, swooped in. Hey, Munchkin, how about we build the biggest, most awesome pillow fort in the whole world? Right in the living room. And we can have pizza for dinner. In the fort, Lily's tears subsided, replaced by a flicker of interest. Pizza in a fort? You bet. Uncle David's Fort of Awesomeness has no rules. He shot me a look that said, I've got this. Go. Grateful, I retreated to the kitchen. My phone, which I'd kept off, felt like a lead weight in my pocket. I powered it on. It exploded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls from Sarah Chin. 100 texts from concerned friends, colleagues, and, of course, more reporters. I ignored them all and called Sarah. She answered on the first ring. Natalie. Oh, thank God. I've been going out of my mind. The police are here, at the office. They have a warrant. They're taking boxes of files from Mark's old office. What the hell is happening? I gave her the abbreviated, sanitized version. Mark and Chloe. They were involved in something illegal. The police are investigating. I'm safe. Lily's safe. David's with me. There was a long silence on the other end. I could almost hear Sarah's brilliant, analytical mind processing the information, reading between the lines of what I wasn't saying, the personal matter you couldn't talk about. She said finally, her voice soft with horror, Oh, Nat, I need you to hold the fort. Sarah, I said, my professional instincts kicking in. A welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil. Issue a statement to the staff. Something vague. Nexus Path is fully cooperating with an investigation into a personal matter involving a former employee. The company's operations are unaffected. You're in charge until further notice. Consider it done, she said, her voice firming up. Don't you worry about a thing here. You just take care of yourself. And Nat? I'm so sorry. We hung up. The next call was to Arthur Finch. It's a three-ring media shitshow out there. Natalie, he said without preamble, I've already started the process for an emergency restraining order against Mark and Chloe, which is a formality since they're in custody. But it helps with the narrative. The DA is charging them both with conspiracy to commit murder. The arraignment is tomorrow. You won't need to be there. And the bail? I asked, my stomach clenching, given the severity of the charges and the wealth involved, which makes them a flight risk. The DA is requesting it be denied. I'd be shocked if the judge grants it. They're staying right where they are. Good. A cold satisfaction settled over me. What about Lily? Your temporary custody is already established due to the circumstances. Arthur said, we'll file for full legal and physical custody immediately. Given the criminal charges, it's a foregone conclusion. Mark will be lucky to get supervised visitation in a prison meeting room. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the cool granite a grounding sensation. Okay, good. Natalie. Arthur's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. This is the easy part. The legal machine will grind on. The hard part is what comes next. For you and for Lily. He was right. The battle in the courthouse was one thing. The battle in my own home, in my daughter's heart, was another. The next few days were a blur of survival. David became my rock, handling the practicalities, groceries, dealing with the increased media presence, running interference. I focused solely on Lily. We didn't leave the house. We built pillow forts, watched endless cartoons, and I held her when she cried for her father, my own tears falling silently into her hair. A week after we returned, a thick, official-looking envelope arrived by courier. It was from Mark's new, court-appointed lawyer. Inside were the divorce papers I had asked Arthur to prepare. All that was needed was my signature. I stared at the words, irreconcilable differences. It was the understatement of the century. I also found a smaller, handwritten note slipped between the pages. The handwriting was Mark's, shaky and unfamiliar. Natalie, I know you never want to see or hear from me again. I don't blame you. What I did is unforgivable. There are no words. But please, I beg you, don't turn Lily against me. She's all I have left to live for. What we had was real once. Remember that. I'm so sorry, Mark. I read the note twice, then a third time. A hot, corrosive anger rose in my chest. She's all I have left to live for. Where was that sentiment when you were planning to make her an orphan? What we had was real once, was it? Or was it all just a long con leading to a cliff's edge? I didn't cry. I walked calmly to the fireplace, struck a match, and held the note over the grate until it curled into black ash. I would not let his manipulative, self-pitying words poison my healing. He had lost the right to ask me for anything. I picked up the divorce papers, found a pen, and with a hand that did not tremble, I signed my name on every highlighted line. Natalie Bennington was gone. I was going back to my maiden name. I was Natalie Archer again. I looked up from the desk. In the living room, David was on all fours, pretending to be a monster attacking the fort of awesomeness. Lily's squeals of laughter echoed through the house. It was a painful, beautiful sound, a sound of life moving forward, even when it felt broken. The aftermath was messy. It was lonely. It was filled with moments of crushing grief and white-hot rage. But as I watched my daughter laugh, I knew one thing for certain. We were going to be okay. The nightmare was over. Now, the slow, difficult work of building a new morning had begun. The courthouse was a temple of cold, hard justice, its marble floors and high, echoing ceilings felt a world away from the cozy deception of our former home. I sat between David and Arthur Finch at the prosecution's table, back straight, hands clasped in my lap. I wore a simple, dark blue dress, authoritative, not flashy, the uniform, as Arthur had called it, for the most important performance of my life. Across the aisle, at the defense table, sat Mark. He looked thinner, older, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He refused to look at me, his gaze fixed on the wood grain of the table. A few feet away, at her own table, sat Chloe. She looked hollowed out, a ghost of the vibrant woman she'd pretended to be. Her lawyer, a harried-looking public defender, was whispering frantically to her. This was the first day of the pretrial hearings, a brutal dance of legal motions where Mark's high-priced attorney would try to get the audio evidence thrown out, to pick apart the conspiracy charge. But everyone in the room knew it was a formality. The real drama had already happened in the DA's office. Chloe, in a desperate bid to save herself, had taken a deal. The judge, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, called the court to order. The air hummed with tension. Before we begin, the district attorney, a sharp woman named Elena Vasquez, said, rising to her feet, "The people would like to address the court regarding a development in the case of the people versus Chloe Dubois." All eyes turned to Chloe. She shrunk in her seat. "Your Honor," Vasquez continued, "the defendant, Ms. Dubois, has agreed to plead guilty to the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in exchange for her full and truthful cooperation against her co-conspirator, Mark Bennington. We are recommending a sentence of 15 years to life, with the possibility of parole." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. 15 years. It sounded like a long time, but it wasn't life. It was a future, a chance Mark would never have. Mark's head snapped up. He stared at Chloe, his face a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. The carefully constructed alliance had not just broken, it had detonated. "You bitch," he snarled, the words echoing in the sudden silence. His lawyer grabbed his arm, shushing him violently. The judge banged her gavel. "Control your client, Mr. Davies, or I will have him removed." Chloe flinched, but didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on the judge, her body trembling. The hearing proceeded, but the energy had shifted. Mark's lawyer's arguments sounded weak, desperate, now that he knew the star witness against his client was sitting just a few feet away. The judge denied every motion to suppress. The evidence was coming in, all of it. A week later, faced with the mountain of evidence, the recordings, Chloe's testimony, Vince Kowalski's statement about the $10,000 payment, Mark's legal team saw the writing on the wall. There would be no trial. They approached the DA with a deal of their own. We were all summoned back to the courtroom for the plea hearing. "Mr. Bennington," the judge said, her voice cool, "you have been charged with conspiracy to commit murder. How do you plead?" Mark stood. His shoulders slumped. He finally turned and looked at me. His eyes were empty, devoid of the charm, the resentment, the life that had once been there. He was a shell. "Guilty, Your Honor," he said, his voice a hollow whisper. The word landed in the room with a final, crushing weight. Guilty. There would be no dramatic trial, no cross-examination where I would have to relive every horrific detail under oath. It was over, just like that. The judge set a date for sentencing. As the bailiffs led Mark away in handcuffs, he paused for a second in front of our table. He looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, the old Mark was there, confused and pleading. "Why, Natalie," he whispered, "why did you have to go back that night?" It was the question of a man who truly believed he was the victim. A man who couldn't see that his own greed and malice were his downfall. Not my simple act of forgetting a file. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice clear and steady, carrying in the quiet room. "I forgot a file. Mark, that's all it was." The shock on his face was almost comical. The utter banality of the reason his perfect plan had collapsed was the final. Cruelest blow. He hadn't been undone by a genius detective or a lucky break. He'd been undone by a simple mistake, a wrong turn home. He was led away, and I knew I would never see him again outside of a prison visiting room. Outside the courthouse, the media swarm was even larger. But this time, I was ready. Arthur and David flanked me, but I stepped forward, toward the forest of microphones. I had something to say. Ms. Bennington, Natalie, how do you feel about the guilty plea? I took a deep breath, my eyes scanning the crowd. My name is Natalie Archer. I began, my voice strong. And today, the legal system has held two people accountable for a plot that was born of greed and betrayal. While I am relieved that this chapter is closed, there are no winners here. My focus now, and always, is on the well-being of my daughter, Lily. I ask that you respect our privacy as we work to rebuild our lives. Thank you. I didn't take questions. I turned and, with David and Arthur, walked through the crowd, which parted silently. I had taken back my name, my narrative, and my life. That evening, back in the quiet of the house, my house now, I sat with Lily on the sofa. The fort of awesomeness was still standing, a monument to our resilience. Mommy, Lily said, snuggling into my side, is Daddy never coming home? I hugged her tight, kissing the top of her head. No, sweetheart, he's not. She was quiet for a moment. Is it because he was mean to you? The question was so simple, so direct. I chose my words with care. He made some very bad choices, honey, and when people make choices that hurt others, there are consequences. She thought about this. Uncle David says we're a team. You and me and him. I felt a surge of love for my brother. That's right, baby. We are the best team, and we're going to be just fine. As I held my daughter, I thought about the long road ahead, the sentencing hearings, the therapy for Lily, the process of truly healing. But the fear was gone. The man who had wanted me dead was locked away. The woman who had helped him would be locked away for a long time. The reckoning was over. The future, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, was finally mine to shape. 6 months later, the buzz of a power saw was a sweeter sound than any symphony. I stood in what was once the formal living room of the Pacific Heights house, a room that had always felt more like a museum exhibit than a place to actually live. Now, it was a construction zone. Drywall dust hung in the air, and the floor was covered in drop cloths. David, wielding the saw with practiced ease, was cutting a new frame for a built-in bookcase. You sure you don't want to just sell this place, Nat? He asked, shutting off the saw. The sudden silence was deafening. Start fresh somewhere else? The market's hot. I ran a hand over the newly exposed brick of the chimney breast. A feature Mark had always insisted on keeping hidden behind drywall. And let him chase me out of my own home? I shook my head, a firm, decisive gesture that had become second nature. No, this is my house, mine and Lily's. We're not running. We're rebuilding. He grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove. Attagirl, just means I get to use my tools more. The doorbell rang. I walked to the front door, my footsteps firm on the bare subfloor. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Miller, looking out of place in her practical pantsuit amidst the construction chaos. I opened the door with a genuine smile. Elena, this is a surprise. Come on in. Mind the mess. She stepped inside, her sharp eyes taking in the transformation. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd give you an update in person. She handed me a sealed envelope. The sentencing memos. Bennington's legal team pulled out all the stops: childhood trauma, sudden financial pressure, temporary insanity, the usual. I didn't open it. I already knew what was inside. And the judge wasn't having any of it. She said, a note of satisfaction in her voice. The premeditation, the recordings, the fact that he never once expressed remorse. He got life. No parole. The words were final, absolute. A chapter slamming shut. I felt nothing. No triumph, no sadness, just a quiet acknowledgement. And Chloe? 25 years. She'll be eligible for parole in 15. But with her testimony, she'll likely serve the full term. Miller paused, studying me. You know, in all my years, I've never seen a case with such clear-cut evidence. Most people in your situation, they don't have the presence of mind to do what you did. What I did was survive. I said simply, you did more than that. She corrected me. You fought back with your brain. It was an honor to work on this case. Natalie. She handed me a business card. It was for a private security firm. A friend of mine runs it. If you ever need anything, even just to consult. Thank you, Elena, for everything. After she left, I stood for a moment in the empty, sunlit space. The house was no longer a gilded cage of memories. It was a blank canvas, filled with the promise of sawdust and new paint. Later that afternoon, I picked up Lily from school. She came running out, a bright, colorful painting in her hand. Mommy, look, we did self-portraits. The painting was of a little girl with a huge smile, standing between a tall woman and an even taller man. The sun was a brilliant yellow splotch in the corner. That's us, she declared. You and me and Uncle David. My heart swelled. It's beautiful. Sweet pea. We'll hang it right on the new fridge. As we drove home, Lily chattered about her day, about a new friend named Maya, about the book they were reading. The normalcy of it was a balm. The shadow that had hung over us was finally, truly, gone. That evening, after Lily was asleep and David had gone home, I poured a glass of wine and finally opened the envelope Detective Miller had given me. I skimmed the legal jargon, my eyes stopping on a single paragraph. A quote from the judge's statement. The cold, calculated nature of this conspiracy, preying upon the victim's trust and exploiting her love for her child, reveals a profound moral bankruptcy. This was not a crime of passion, but a meticulously planned execution of greed. A life sentence is not only a punishment, but a statement that such a fundamental betrayal of the social contract will not be tolerated. I put the paper down. I walked to the large window overlooking the city. San Francisco glittered below, a landscape of lights and possibilities. I thought about the woman I was 6 months ago, the tired, trusting wife who thought a forgotten file was her biggest problem. That woman was gone, forged in the fire of betrayal. Someone stronger had emerged. My phone buzzed. It was Sarah Chen. Sarah! Just got the final numbers. Q3 profits are up 18%. The board is ecstatic. They want to discuss the 5-year expansion plan. When are you coming back? I smiled. Nexus Path was mine again. Truly mine. And it was thriving. Me. Tell them I'll be in on Monday. 9 a.m. sharp. And Sarah, clear my afternoon. We have a company to run. I put the phone down. The past was a closed book. The future was a blank page. And I was finally holding the pen. I was Natalie Archer, a CEO, a mother, a survivor. The foundation of my new life was no longer built on sand, but on the unshakable bedrock of my own strength. And it was rock solid